Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shaar. We're studying Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah, and we are holding in Perek Vav. If you have an English lessons in Tanya in front of you, we're at the top of page 899 by the words Ve'imkein. If you have a Hebrew Tanya in front of you, we're on page 160 or Daf Pei Amud Beis, more than halfway down the page, where it says again Ve'imkein. So the entire Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah, of course, is based on the pasuk V'yadatu hayoim v'hashavoisa el levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim. You should know today, take to heart, Hashem hu Elokim v'shamayim imal, in the heavens above, alorz mitoch haseinot. Now, when you ask people what is the chiddush, what is the innovation, what's the contribution of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah, so most of the time they'll tell you, and they'll tell you correctly, that the Alter Rebbe explains to us that there's a new understanding in the words Einoid. Until Tanya, until Chassidus, we understood that Einoid means there's no other God, there's no other deity, there's no other independent or even dependent force or power other than Hashem. Chassidus teaches us that Einoid means nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Okay. But actually, while that's of course true, it's not really the depth. The depth, or it's not the entire depth. The depth of the contribution of the chiddush of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah begins really with the concept of understanding the meaning of the word in the pasuk Ki Hashem hu Elokim. And that's really what the Alter Rebbe focuses on here in this part of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah. The deeper meaning of Havaye Ki Hashem hu Elokim, or Ki Havaye hu Elokim. Now, Shem Havaye is. Now we come to this. We sort of come to this discussion about Shem Havaye and Shem Elokim through the discussion about Einoid. We start with discussing Einoid, and from there we get to the discussion about Havaye Elokim. We start with explaining that Einoid means. Well, again, the Alter Rebbe hasn't put this into the words Einoid yet, but the idea is explained to us right away in the beginning that nothing else really exists besides for Hashem, which leads the Alter Rebbe to the big question. Right, at the end of Perek Gimel, the big question is, well, if nothing else exists besides for Hashem, then why isn't this more apparent? Why isn't this more revealed? Why are we living in a world that seems so ungodly? And this brings us to a discussion about Shem Havaye and Shem Elokim, primarily Shem Elokim, where the concept is Tzimtzum and Helam V'Hester, etc. Where the idea here is that the Rebbeinu Shloim Hashem, because he operates both through Shem Havaye and through Shem Elokim, he can do two things at once. He can create the world. He can create a world which is one with him. He can create a world which doesn't have any independent existence other than himself. He can create a world that is in such a state of bittul, it can be compared to the light of the sun as it exists within the sun itself. And he can do all of that at the same time as he does something else, which is this concept of Shem Elokim, where the godliness in the world is not revealed or is not apparent at all. Okay, so this is what's been explained here. This is what's been explained until here. Now in Perek Vav, the Alter Rebbe takes this to the next level, reveals to us a deeper level here in this concept of Shem Havaye and Shem Elokim. Not just that Hashem, the Eibishter, operates with both, right, creates the world and hides himself at the same time, but actually even Shem Elokim, which is intended, which conceals. So the idea here, right, like we learned last week. So the idea here is not, in the end, the purpose of it is not really to create concealment. The purpose of it actually is to solve a problem. In other words, we think of Shem Elokim as the one creating the problem, so to speak. We think of Shem Elokim as the one creating the concealment, as the force that's responsible for there not being a sufficient amount of Gilui Elokus. Explains the Alter Rebbe, actually that's not really the truth. The truth is that Shem Elokim is not really creating, it's not really creating the problem, if you will. Shem Elokim is actually a solution to the problem. So what really is the problem? The problem is that these nivroim, that these creations that Hashem has created, have limited capacity in terms of how much godliness they can absorb, in terms of how much Elokus they're a keli to. So if there would be no tzimtzum, so it's not the pshat that if there would be no tzimtzum, there would be revealed godliness in all created beings, and godliness would just be complete, and all created beings would be able to absorb an unlimited amount of godliness. No, not at all. Without Shem Elokim, the created beings wouldn't be able to be aware of their own existence. And since that's not the Tachlis HaKavana, since that's not the ultimate purpose is that there should be created beings who are aware, who could feel their own existence, and that as their own existence they should be able to be kalim, they should be able to be vessels to godliness. So Shem Elokim is actually here as a solution. Shem Elokim, this concept of tzimtzum doesn't, again, I'm repeating myself, tzimtzum doesn't create the problem, tzimtzum is the solution to the problem. The problem is that the created beings, once they're aware, once they feel their own existence, they're trapped. They're limited in their ability to absorb true godliness, because the nature of godliness is that nothing else exists besides for Hashem. And these created beings, Hashem created them in such a way that they do feel that they are aware of their own existence. So the solution to this is Shem Elokim. The solution to this is tzimtzum, where tzimtzum is the ability to communicate something, to take a deep concept, let's say, and to communicate it to a person or to an individual or to a level which has very limited capacity in how much it can contain. Shem Elokim is this tzimtzum. Shem Elokim is this magical or fantastic ability to take Shem Havaye, to take the greatest levels of godliness, and to communicate it slowly and bit by bit to let it trickle down, godliness, into a world in which the world feels itself and its own existence first, and it feels God second, and Shem Elokim allows the godliness to communicate with that world. And this, Alter Rebbe says, is the deeper meaning of what the Pasuk means when it says, Ki Havaye hu Elokim, that Shem Havaye and Shem Elokim are one, because actually we shouldn't see Shem Havaye and Shem Elokim as fighting with each other. Right? Shem Havaye pushing to reveal and Shem Elokim pushing to contract. Actually, that's not a correct understanding. Shem Havaye is pushing to reveal. Shem Elokim facilitates, right? Shem Elokim facilitates. Shem Elokim allows this revelation of Shem Havaye to be manifest, to express itself even into the smallest and tiniest of places, like Nivroim, created beings, that can only take very, very limited revelations of godliness, right? So, all right, the mashal, or one of the mashalim, or one of the many mashalim that are given for this, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, is, let's say, a parent who's feeding a child, and the child is very young. The child is 1 year old, let's say, or a baby, right? And for the parent to feed the baby, so they have to use tzimtzum. For a parent to feed a baby, they have to use tzimtzum. When you feed an adult, then you put down a whole meal. You put down bread, and you put down steak, and you put down vegetables, and you make it balanced, of course, to the ganze Zach. But you put it down, and this way, when you feed an adult, you get to feel like you're really able to share with them. You're really able to give them. And when you have your own little baby, and the baby is a couple of months old, of course, a parent wants to give the whole world to their baby. Yeah, but if you give the baby steak and mashed potatoes and vegetables, the baby won't be able to eat it, and if it does, the baby will get sick. Rahman it can become fatal. So you have to give the baby mamash bedafka milk, which is a very light type of food, and even the milk you have to give it with a bottle which releases mamash tippin, drops. So there's two ways to look at this. One way is to say, well, there's midas hachesed, right? The parents wants to give the baby everything. And the bottle is holding back. The bottle is saying, no, don't give everything. Give just mamash little droplets. And then, you buy those pieces at the top of the bottle that literally come with numbers, 1, 2, 3, so that it's mamash, it's tailor-made for the age of the child. But obviously that's a superficial way of understanding it. The bottle, the part that goes into the baby's mouth is not fighting with the parent's midas hachesed. The parent wants to give more, but nebach, they're constricted to using this bottle, and the bottle is holding back. Quite the opposite. The parent buys the bottle and pays good money for it and makes sure that it works, and makes sure that it works properly. Why? Because the bottle becomes a keli, a vehicle, a vessel, which the parent uses to be mashpia, to give to the baby, even in the baby's limited and, in this case, very fragile, just mamash a couple of months old life, where it has very, very limited capacity in terms of how much it can contain. So the same thing is with Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is not there. Tzimtzum is not fighting with Shem Havaye, right? Tzimtzum is not going, no, we got to hold back. Tzimtzum is the keli that Shem Havaye uses, let's say, to be mashpia, to give sustenance in a world in which it can contain barely any amount of revelation of godliness, because the world, again, feels itself as an existence first. But Mela, this becomes a deeper understanding of the concept of Havaye hu Elokim, that Havaye and Elokim are not just not fighting with each other, but they're actually one and the same. It's all chesed, like the Alter Rebbe says. It's all chesed. Even the bottle that holds back the milk and makes sure that the baby will drink mamash one drop at a time, this is also chesed. In fact, it's not also chesed. It's the greatest chesed, so that the baby can take it on a level that they can handle. Okay, this is what we've explained until now. The Imkain, if so, again, I'm on the top of 899, or page 160. I'm a little more than halfway through the page. Last word in the line is Memela. The Imkain, Memela Teda, says the Alter Rebbe, once you've understood this concept of Havaye hu Elokim, that the Shem Elokim, Midas HaGvura, that Tzimtzum is not creating the problem. On the contrary, it's the solution to the problem. Shem Havaye would not be able to solve this. Shem Havaye, if it would be revealed, would just blow the world up in terms of not allowing it to feel itself at all. But in order to have a world that feels itself, and nevertheless can receive some level of godliness, for this we have Shem Elokim and Mela Teda. Once you've understood this, you've understood Sheba Shemayim Imal Valoris Mitochas Einoid. You can now understand the rest of the pasuk, that in the heavens and the earth, Einoid, there's nothing else besides for Hashem. Pirush. What's one thing got to do with the other? This is, to be honest with you, this is not so easy to understand. What Alter Rebbe is saying over here, it requires a lot of, it's not for nothing that the Tanya is called the Torah Shebechsav of Chassidus, because every word, every line, has to be processed here. I'll do my humble best to explain it, but a lot of Chassidus was written on this. Most famously, actually, there's a mimer of the Rebbe Rashab called V'yadaita that he said in Tov Reish Nun Zayin. In Hebrew, that's 5,657, specifically on this concept. But be it as it may, we'll do our humble best. Pirush Shagam Ha'oretz HaChumris, that even this materialistic world, Sheniris Yesh Gomer, that it seems like an existence, and not just an existence, a Yesh Gomer, a complete existence, L'ein Koil, to the eye, it seems like a complete existence apparently. Is absolutely nothing from Hashem's perspective. Why? Because Shem Elokim does not conceal or constrict not in relation to Hashem, since Hashem and His name Elokim Echad are one. Therefore, even the world, and lower than the world, are absolute nothing relative to Hashem from Hashem's perspective, and they have no significance of their own. They have no independent significance at all. All right, so what's the Alter Rebbe saying? He's saying once we understand the pasuk is not just waxing, poetry over here. No. It's not just, we're not just throwing a bunch of things on a wall here and seeing what sticks. The Alter Rebbe is teaching only once you understand Ki Havaye hu Elokim, then you can understand that Bashamayim imal v'aloretz mitochas ein oid, nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Okay. So let's start with this. There seems to be an inherent contradiction or tension in the pasuk itself. Even once we interpret, or I should say specifically once we interpret, that Einoid means that nothing else exists besides for Hashem. And now that we understand the pasuk to mean Bashamayim imal, in the heavens above, V'aloretz mitochas, in the earth below, Einoid, nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Once we say this, we come to an inherent tension in the pasuk. You see, if nothing else exists besides for Hashem, then why is the pasuk talking about Bashamayim imal v'aloretz mitochas? there is no Shemayim Mimal, and there is no Oretz Mitachas. There's nothing else. Ein Od. Nothing else exists besides for Hashem. So if you translate Bashamayim Mimal Val Oretz Mitachas means there's no other God besides for Hashem, there's no other independent force besides for Hashem, fine. Then Bashamayim Mimal exists, Oretz Mitachas exists, but they exist but they don't have any autonomy, right? They don't have any independence. There's no other God besides for Hashem. Say that Bashamayim Mimal Oretz Mitachas exists. But if we're going to touch that Ein Od, Ein Od means not that there's no other God, but there's no other existence besides for Hashem. So if there's no other existence besides for Hashem, so what's Bashamayim Mimal Val Oretz Mitachas? So what are we even talking about? Nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Finished. But yet the pasuk is saying no. There's Shemayim Mimal, there's Oretz Mitachas, and in the Shemayim and on the Oretz, there's nothing else that exists besides for Hashem. So we're back to the original question. We're back to the original tension here. Does the world exist or does the world not exist? The pasuk seems to we've traced this philosophical existential dilemma that Chassidus grapples with at no end, right? Forever. Yes, the world, no, the world. Yes, exists, doesn't exist. We've finally traced this all the way back to the pasuk itself. Now that we understand the pasuk to mean nothing else exists besides for Hashem, and yet in the same breath, the pasuk is recognizing Bashamayim Mimal Val Oretz Mitachas that there is a heaven and there is an earth. So how do we resolve this? So the Alter Rebbe says the resolution is the understanding that Havaye hu Elokim. So again, there's many ways of resolving it, but here is this perspective. Here's the explanation of the Alter Rebbe here. The answer is, why on the one hand do we say, again the question, why on the one hand do we say Bashamayim Mimal Val Oretz Mitachas, which means the Torah's emes says there is a heavens and there is an earth, and at the same time we say, nothing else exists besides for Hashem. What's the answer? The answer is, it depends on whose perspective. If we're talking from the Eibishter's perspective, then we say Ein Od, it's clear that nothing else exists besides for Hashem. If you're talking about from the human's perspective, from the created being's perspective, there is Bashamayim Mimal Val Oretz Mitachas, there is a world that does exist. We definitely feel ourselves as existing. How can you have both? How can Hashem create a world that feels itself as an existence? And yet at the same time, from Hashem's perspective, there is no existence at all? The answer is Havaye hu Elokim. The answer is that the tzimtzum that Hashem has used, the tzimtzum that Hashem, this power of tzimtzum, that creates this reality in which godliness is manifest, even in worlds, even in realms and realities which don't really feel Hashem. This attribute is one with Hashem. It's also godly, it's also divine. And so from Hashem's perspective, there's no interruption, there's nothing that interferes, nothing gets in the way. And everything is godliness, and nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Whereas from our perspective, we feel ourselves as that we do exist. That's what Alter Rebbe is saying over here. The idea that Havaye hu Elokim, that the concept of tzimtzum is not really holding back. It's just facilitating Hashem's master plan of communicating godliness even to a reality which feels itself as an existence. This idea bridges the gap. This idea bridges the gap of how you can have, on the one hand, from Hashem's perspective, nothing else exists besides for Hashem. The other hand, from our perspective, we very much do feel our existence, and we do feel ourselves as us existing first. Okay, so what does it mean? So what's the explanation? What does it mean? So I'll give the Rebbe Rashab's mashal for this, and then maybe try to explain it a little bit in more human terms, but will give the Rebbe Rashab's mashal. So the Rebbe Rashab's mashal in the Maimer I mentioned before of Yodaito, the Rebbe Rashab uses the analogy of a teacher who's teaching a concept to students, but again, the students are not sophisticated enough, they're not deep enough to understand really what the teacher is saying. The idea would be lost in the students. So the teacher needs tzimtzum. So what's the teacher do for tzimtzum? One of the ways of tzimtzum is the teacher will use a mashal. A mashal. A Maisa, you have this in Midrashim very often, you have this in Gemara, you have this very common. Chassidus for sure, many Mashalim. A mashal is a story about something else that's, at least at the surface, completely unrelated. A Maisa with a king, a Maisa with a queen, a Maisa with a, Reb Nachman of Breslov was very famous for his Mashalim, a mashal. A mashal is seemingly a story or something that has mamash nothing to do with anything, right? You tell a story about a person who travels to an island where there's diamonds all over the floor. So what does the mashal do? So the mashal is something that is palpable for the students. The students can understand the mashal. They can understand it. They can remember it. If it's a Torah mashal, so every detail in the mashal is as accurate as possible, is as much in line as possible with the nimshal. Okay, this is the Rebbe Rashab's mashal. It's a mashal from a mashal. It's a mashal of the concept of a mashal. Says the Rebbe Rashab, when the teacher gives the student a mashal, there's actually two complete realities that are going on here. Let's start with the world of the students. In the world of the students, the nimshal, the idea that's being communicated through the mashal, is completely unavailable for the students. The idea is too lofty for them. They have no access to it. They cannot understand it. If the teacher would share it with them, they would lose their minds completely. Not just they would lose their minds, it would have no significance to them. So in this mashal, the nimshal is completely hidden. Completely. Instead of the teacher talking about what the idea the teacher really wants to teach, the teacher has changed the topic altogether. We're now talking about something else. Where's the idea? It's completely hidden. As far as the students is concerned, we're now talking about kings, queens, and castles. In the world of the students, you have Helam v'Hester. What about in the world of the teacher? In the world of the teacher, there's no concealment at all, says the Rebbe Rashab. Not only that, but as the teacher teaches the analogy and gives every detail of the analogy, in the teacher's world, from the teacher's perspective, the teacher can see the nimshal, the idea that they're teaching, they can see it shining in every part, in every detail of the mashal that they're giving the students. The teacher sees the whole thing in the mashal. The students don't see it. In the world of the students, the mashal is concealing the nimshal. In the world of the teacher, the mashal is revealing the nimshal. Again, in the world of the students, the mashal is concealing the nimshal. The mashal hides. The mashal covers over the nimshal. In the world of the teacher, it's the other way around. The nimshal is completely revealed in the mashal. The nimshal is completely revealed in the mashal. The teacher is sitting there talking about a mashal, but the teacher can see how the whole idea is being expressed in the mashal. So from the student's perspective, it's concealment. From the teacher's perspective, it's revelation. But then the Rebbe Rashab says more. Then the Rebbe Rashab says, but it's not entirely accurate to say that from the student's perspective there's concealment here. That's not entirely accurate either. Because actually, now that the student absorbs the mashal, with time the student will be able to absorb the nimshal too. Now that the student has absorbed the mashal, with time the student will be able to absorb the nimshal too. Why? How is the student going to be able to do this? If the nimshal is above them, how with time is the student going to be able to elevate themselves to a level where they get the nimshal? The answer is because the nimshal is hidden in the mashal. So as the student absorbs the mashal slowly, whether they are aware of it, whether they feel it or not, the student begins to absorb the message, the nimshal of the teacher as well. Until however long it takes, with time, even if it takes 40 years, the student actually is elevated to the level where they can understand the idea that the teacher is teaching. This is the Rebbe Rashab's explanation. Let's give a human mush, right? I gave a mushal of feeding a baby. So you're feeding him, you say a parent wants to give a child, they want to feed the child a tremendous amount. But lepoil they can't, so they're giving the child droplets of milk. Okay. As the parent feeds the child droplets of milk, mamash drops, right? If you gave this to an adult, they would die of starvation. Rahman al-Islam. Mamash drops. So again, you have these two realities. In the world of the baby, in the world of the child, are they tasting steak in the milk, in these couple of droplets of milk? All right, if the mother's nursing, they say the baby can taste everything that the mother eats. But be it as it may, is the baby eating steak? The baby's having droplets of milk, and it can take 2, 3, 4 ounces. That's it. So in the world of the baby, all the baby has is just this little bit of milk that it's receiving. But in the world of the parent that's feeding the baby, that's nourishing the baby, the parent is already imagining that in Mitzvah Shem the baby will grow up, and the baby will eat, and the baby will grow, please God, and they'll develop with Hashem's help, and until eventually they'll become a godel, and they'll be able to eat and drink, and the parent will be able to give them much, much more. So the parent understands that right now, in order to sustain the baby, we have to give them this little amount. But in the world of the parent, this isn't really a tzimtzum in the sense where we're deciding not to give the baby more. Quite the contrary. These little drops of milk are going to facilitate that eventually we'll be able to give eventually as the baby, the milk will nourish the baby will grow, and eventually we'll be able to give the baby everything. According to Chassidus, it's important to emphasize how significant this idea is, how impactful this idea is according to Chassidus. According to Chassidus, what we're talking about here really is the purpose of the creation of the world. When we say Nis'ava Kodesh Bar, the Hashem was created because Hashem wanted a dir b'tachtonim, a dwelling place in this physical world. What does it mean, a dwelling place in this physical world? Chassidus says, a dwelling place means a place where a person is free to be themselves and they can be completely revealed. No tzimtzumim. It's a dwelling place. A dwelling place means no tzimtzumim. Whenever I go anywhere else, I have to adapt myself according to my surroundings. In my home, I'm free to be me. Unless I'm married, in which case it's a different deal. Just kidding. In a home, a person is free to be themselves, completely, in a healthy way. No restraints. This is the purpose of the creation of the world, right? Hashem wanted dir b'tachtonim to be able to be manifest and expressed completely. Okay, now let me ask you a question. Before Hashem created the world, was Hashem comfortable? Did Hashem have to exercise any type of constraint or restraint? No. Hashem could be himself. There was nothing else going on. It was just Hashem. So then what happens? So now Hashem creates the world, and now Hashem says, I want to be fully manifest. No, you were fully manifest before. Why'd you create the world? The answer is obvious. Hashem wanted to be able to be fully manifest within the world. That means it's like in our mashal. The teacher understands the whole idea before they teach the student. What they want is that what the teacher wants is to teach it to the student, to elevate the student to the teacher's level, so that the teacher can share their own ideas with the student, and the student should understand. Or like the parent wants to sustain the child, so that the child will eventually grow up and become a godel like the parent, and the parent will be able to give them everything. In order to facilitate that, that's where Gvura, that's where Midas HaTzimtzum comes in. That's where Tzimtzum comes in. Tzimtzum comes in to bridge this process, to take us from a world in which the teacher is only revealed in his own world, not the world of the student, a world in which a parent can only give a child milk, and a world in which Hashem creates a tachtonim that has no godly revelation, that reality, to a reality in which the student understands everything, and the child has grown up and can eat everything, and the world is now a place, a keli, in which Hashem can be manifest without any restrictions. That's where you have this concept of Shem Elokim. Shem Elokim somehow, Tzimtzum somehow bridges this gap, takes us from a world in which there's only Hashem and no world. Again, let me I want to articulate this again. We start off with a reality. We start off with an existence where nothing else exists besides for Hashem. Nothing else could exist besides for Hashem. That's the beginning point. The destination is where there is a world, but a world which is a created being, created by Hashem, feels itself. And as a world which feels itself, it becomes a keli to absorb the absolute, unvarnished, no holds barred revelation of godliness called dir b'tachtonim. Now, initially, when Hashem creates the world, this isn't possible. Initially, in order to create the world, Hashem has to, one second. Initially, when Hashem creates the world, this is impossible. If Hashem were to reveal himself as he was before the creation of the world would cease to be in existence. The world would cease to be aware of itself. So Shem Elokim, which we think of as Hashem constricting himself in order to create a world which feels itself as an existence, is actually it's not in the end responsible just for creating a world which feels itself as an existence. What it really is, what Shem Elokim really is the solution that the world that feels itself in existence should eventually be able to be elevated to a level in which godliness can be manifest without any restraints. The secret, now this is the meaning of this, in the end, this is the meaning of Einoit. That Bashamayim Imal Va'aloros B'tochas, that in the world, in the heavens and in the earth, is revealed, is manifest that nothing else exists besides for Hashem, and it's taka both together. It's taka both together. It's taka a world which is aware of itself, a world which is aware of itself as an existence, because that's the way Hashem created it, which at the same time is aware, is a keli to receive the absolute unbridled, unvarnished, no holds barred essence and unity of Hashem. How is it possible? Taka doesn't make sense. Taka beyond human comprehension, like the Alter Rebbe said before. It's possible only with godliness. It'll be revealed, of course, completely in the end, only when Mashiach comes. But I'm going to go back to the word bridge. But the bridge or the methodology that makes this possible is the concept of Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum says, I'll take you from a world in which the revelation of godliness doesn't allow another existence to feel itself as an existence, into a world in which you can have an existence that feels itself as an existence, and at the same time experiences the fact that nothing else exists besides for Hashem. What's the explanation? How can Shem Elokim do that? The explanation is because Havaye hu Elokim. Because Shem Elokim in the end is also a system of revealing godliness, not concealing godliness. The concealment is only to bring this revelation into a world or into another which initially feels itself as an existence. Wow. Again, these are the oisias. This is where we're talking. We're talking the concept of chassidus here. This is the oisias. This is what the Rabbeim have taught us. That this is the understanding of what's written here. I want to add something. In general, when we talk about Tzimtzum, right, the source, the original source of this idea of Tzimtzum comes from the Arizal. Right? The Arizal taught that before Hashem created the world, there was Or Ein Sof, there was Hashem's infinite light, Mamala Mokam HaCholol, which filled the void, which filled all of existence, whatever that means, and there was no place for the existence of the world, so Hashem he did what's called Tzimtzum Rishon or Silak. Hashem retracted his light and created a vacuum in which the worlds could come into existence. Okay, it's a teaching of the Ari, as recorded by many of his students. Pretty much, verbatim, the worded slightly one way or the other, but the idea is pretty much unanimous. Once Hashem removes his light, creates a space for the world, then the world is created. And then slowly but surely the world is introduced to a level of godliness, right? Like a teacher teaching a student through a mashal, like a parent feeding a child, drops of milk with a bottle, until the world grows and develops, until it eventually becomes a gadol. The world grows up, it becomes a gadol, it becomes, the student grows up, the world develops to a point where it can handle it can handle on a conscious level, the full throttle, the full revelation of godliness as it was before the existence of the world. This is the way Chassidus teaches the purpose of the creation of the world. We call this Tir B'Tachtonim. The Rebbe would add something to this. It's what can we say? We're very humble students, but it seems typical of the Rebbe's style, this observation. The Rebbe says he refuses to accept that the purpose of all of creation, the purpose all of existence, is to bring us right back to where we started. In other words, we had the reality, we had a world in which Elokus is begilui, godliness is revealed without any restraints. Hashem wanted, so he created a world that isn't a keli, isn't a vessel for this type of godly revelation. And with time, nurtured the world and elevated it until it got back, until the world eventually is a keli to receive the original infinite light of Hashem. So the Rebbe says, so what? So we did a big giant circle and we came back to where we started. The Rebbe says that can't be all. Now again, until the Rebbe came around, it was understood. What do you mean? Until now, there was no world. Right? Until now, the student didn't understand anything. It was just the teacher. Now the student is on the level of a teacher. This is an incredible accomplishment. Says the Rebbe, yeah, it's true, but there's more. But wait, said the Rebbe, there's more. What's more? In the moshel of student and teacher, says the Rebbe, you see that when the teacher teaches the teacher themselves is elevated in the process. The teacher himself uncovers and discovers new depth as the teacher teaches. And eventually the student is elevated to those levels as well. So in the end, it's not just that the student is elevated to the level of the teacher as the teacher was before they taught the lesson. No! The teacher themselves gets elevated in the process, and the student is elevated to the new heights that the teacher himself or herself has reached. Says the Rebbe, that part is also true when it comes to Hashem. And what do you mean? Hashem is elevated to a higher level. But what do we mean by that? Says the Rebbe, I'll tell you. When we say that before Hashem created the world, before there was any existence, there was Ein Sof, there was Hashem's infinite light. And that infinite light didn't allow for the creation of the world. Says the Rebbe, that infinite light is also not in the end the real, true, ultimate godly revelation. It's like saying that the way the teacher understands before they teach the student is not really the teacher's full potential. The teacher's full potential will only be reached after they teach the student. So it's true with Eibishter as well. That the real revelation of godliness is experienced not before the world comes into existence. Before the world comes into existence, there is revelation of godliness, and it's too great for the world to receive. It's too lofty, and you need tzimtzum. But even that level of godliness is also not the ultimate. When we say Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu Lislei Dir B'Tachtonim, Hashem wanted Dir B'Tachtonim, it's not just for the world's sake; it's also for Hashem's sake. It's like saying when the teacher wants to teach the student, it's not just for the student's sake, it's also in the end for the teacher's sake too. The Eibishter himself also experiences, whatever this means, a greater level of Gil Elokus through Dir B'Tachtonim. So in the end, we're not starting off with a great level of revelation of godliness, concealing it, and then coming back to the original place where we started. No! When we come back to the original place, actually we're on a much higher level than we were before. It's called Soisal Manas Livnes. You break something in order to rebuild it, not to rebuild it the same way as it was before, because what was the point? You destroy it, and and in order to rebuild it, when you want to rebuild something which is much greater than it was before. Now you can say, but Hashem doesn't have to do it that way. Hashem could do it anyway. And this is obviously a choice. Yes, it's true. And we don't understand why Hashem wanted to do it this way. But I refuse to accept, says the Rebbe, that in the end we end up with the same godly revelation that we had before. No. We have to say that in the end, because of the process of Dir B'Tachtonim, even Elokus itself, even the Eibishter himself, is elevated, the Gilui Elokus is elevated to a higher level. Not different, by the way, than the concept of an neshama coming into this world. When the neshama will come into this world, experience a tremendous tzimtzum, struggle, and then after an entire life, the neshama goes back up. So what do you say? The neshama will go back up to get to the same place that it was before, then what was the point? Because it doesn't go back to the same place as it was before. It goes much higher. It goes much higher. And so in the Rebbe's Torah Chassidus, in the Rebbe's holistic Torah Chassidus, any experience that a person goes through, or even that the Eibishter himself goes through, in the end has a purpose. And we wouldn't say that the purpose is for one thing as opposed to another. In the end, the purpose is everything. And so even as far as the potential of Gil Elokus, how much of the Eibishter could be revealed and experienced, even this is elevated to a higher level through the process of the creating of the world. All right. I appreciate that we're dabbling here in the deepest concepts of Chassidus, and we all have an obligation as Chassidim, as Lubavitcher Chassidim, to do our best to understand them. Well, we also got to do two things at once, right? We got to remember on the one hand that our understanding is limited, very limited, and at the same time we can't write ourselves off and say we cannot understand these things. 7 Rebbes didn't pour out Torah Chassidus for us to sit there and shrug our shoulders and go, listen, the stuff sounds too esoteric and too nuanced for us. We have to do our best to understand, and the Rebbe will help us. The Rebbe will help us, please God. The Rebbe will bench us. Will get some idea, some inkling of an understanding here. All right. Have a wonderful week. Zayt alle Gesundheit, Freilich and Purim, of course, and we'll continue in Shem next Wednesday.